All right. So you're gonna love this opening sentence. Why are Americans more likely to kill each other than citizens of other wealthy industrialized nations? Are we more bloodthirsty, more violent, more psychopathic than others? Or is there something about our culture that encourages us to settle our differences with violence? Okay, now we're getting into the actual questions.
Okay.
Okay, what factor or factors, in your opinion, influence our perception of violent crime and terrorism?
Sorry, of violence and domestic terrorism? Was that
Violent
the?
crime, violent crime, and or terrorism, or violent crime and
Okay. Things that influence our perception. So not
yeah.
necessarily like why is it happening, but like how do
Mhm.
we think the way
Yeah,
we
no, we'll get
do?
into
I
that.
mean, yeah, I mean, okay, number one thing that comes to mind on that is just like how it our modern media climate, and just how sensationalized like all sorts of like news is, whether that be like stuff you're scrolling through on social media,
Hmm.
or um things that actually get on the cable news programs is very biased towards like violent crime and other like things that will turn a lot of heads.
Yeah.
Um if that question is like with the US as opposed to like the world at large specifically,
Hmm.
I feel like we probably have it like at least a little worse than a
Oh, a
lot of
lot.
places. Yeah. Um it's I'm curious how many other places have something equivalent to like the fairness doctrine. Well, that's not necessarily related to this. But just like kind of like media like regulations and things like kind of trying to keep media honest is,
Hmm.
I mean, we've seen those get eroded, and then like truthful sources of media or places that at least try and do some fact checking like slowly get kind of replaced with some guy on YouTube and like like misinformation deliberately spread through like TikTok and like all that kind of stuff.
Hmm. Okay. All right. So, how does violent crime and terrorism affect you mentally or emotionally and in your day-to-day life? And why? Why does it do that?
Um, I think it definitely, I mean, I realize to a certain extent a lot of the reporting on violent crime is kind of overstated. I mean, on it, okay. The things that get to me more are like public shootings and that kind of thing of like not inherently necessarily political violence, but like violent. I guess any violence trying to send a real message is political violence to some
Mhm.
degree. But like right, like the recent rise, and by recent I mean probably like the past 15, 20 years, um, of just like crime for the sake of like sending a message to people, or just like um there's a lot of kind of like imitation going on in like some of the more high profile like school shootings and that kind of things. I think it's
Mhm.
interesting to consider like why those kind of rates are so high. And it's like um when it comes to like things that isn't like as it's just kind of I guess like random like violence on the streets and stuff like that. Like I know violent crime rates are lowering, and so while whenever I hear about that kind of stuff, it's like, well, that's concerning and we should probably look into it. Like I realize it's not like, oh, society like right now is necessarily like sick and needs to be
Mhm.
fixed um as
You're doing
as
that
much
thing
as
again. You're doing that thing again where you are addressing all of the things that were supposed to be like gotchas in the class, where it's like actually this, and you just keep bringing it up, and it's great with you being like actually the overall violent crime rates are down. It's just like that was a moment in the class of just like where it was just like y'all think violence is up, right? Bro.
yeah. I mean, okay, I am under the belief maybe this isn't right, but I at least like the like mass shootings and like school shootings and all sorts of like public just like kind of
And
killings of opportunity of that sort like are definitely on the rise, right? But
yeah.
violent crime in general is down.
Mhm.
Is what has is what I okay, cool.
Yeah. And would you also say with like school shootings, it's not necessarily because you were like kind of dancing around the idea of it being like political violence, but do you think it's also an issue of being like not always political, but politicized, where it's like it's politicized after the fact?
Yeah, I mean it's when I say political, I don't mean necessarily like Democrat, Republican, left or right, or
Hmm.
I mean as much
Yeah,
as
you mean
just
like
kind of
healthcare
like
CEO, like that kind of.
yeah, is if you have some sort of agenda or reason behind your shooting,
Mhm.
like it's gonna be political in some sort of nature, meaning that like you there are some like killings like that, like especially like school shootings that are just kind of influenced by a culture of like nihilism and just
Mhm.
like, well, this sucks and like I'm just gonna take out some people and myself.
Yeah.
Um, which I mean, you could argue that that is also political to an extent because a lot of that is influenced by people around them spreading those kinds of beliefs, and political philosophy, I guess.
Yeah. Right. So, what solution or solutions do you support to reduce the intentional killing of Americans and why?
So I think that reasonable restrictions and okay, gun control, meaning both like registration and at least reducing the amount and like type of weapons that get used can make a difference of some sort. Like I know Australia is used fairly often as like a kind of counterpoint to people saying like, oh, um we can't like take guns off the street and expect violent crime to decrease because they and I believe the early 2000s or late 90s
Mhm.
implemented some like common sense like gun restrictions, meaning like keeping better track of like who's registered and who has what guns and like doing like gun buyback programs where just like accessibility to specifically firearms, but I mean weapons in general, is just like so widespread, unregulated, and easy for people who probably should not have access to them in whatever way you want to define that.
Mhm.
Just kind of end up with really easy access to it is like a big part of why these happen.
Mhm. Uh, so for implementing these, how feasible do you think that that would be in the U.S., like specifically in the U.S.?
That is okay. Feasible in terms of public support, I think is like the main thing that you're gonna need to get past. I think if we could just like wave a magic wand and have that be like our official policy, then like it would, I mean, it wouldn't drive like violent crime to zero, but it would certainly help reduce it.
Mhm.
But yeah, it is gonna be very hard to try and implement those sorts of things. I feel like having more stringent like regulation is meaning on like who can purchase new guns is probably going to be the easiest thing to actually like get enough people to support to make meaningful change.
Mhm.
Um yeah. Um I think maybe my perception of this is wrong, but I feel like gun buybacks at the least, like I feel like a lot of people would see it as a waste of money, but it's like you're not taking away guns from anyone who didn't want to give them back. So from that aspect, I feel like it's a lot easier to justify.
Mhm.
But then there's, all the people who are like, well, this is just government waste. Like, why are we
Because
buying
so with,
guns when they're
with
still
Australia, it was like the gun buybacks were mandatory.
uh
So it was like for certain types of guns, like it was optional but illegal. I don't know.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good point. It's been a while since I looked into
I need
the
to like,
details of that, which I definitely need to again.
yeah, it was like the way that it was discussed in class was kind of interesting because it was like kind of optional, anonymous whenever you went to like turn your guns in, but then they had a way of enforcing like, so I'm assuming what it was is like if you were caught with a gun after, then that's when it's a problem.
Uh,
But I have no idea. Probably should look more into it as well.
yeah. But yeah, I mean, even if it isn't like mandatory at all, like, just having less easily accessible guns in random people's hands is a good thing.
Mhm.
I think. Yeah, it's also kind of
Yeah,
funny that you bring that like kind of case study up, like mentioned in class.
yeah, that's why I was smiling again about it. Um, so that's the main obstacle, which is the next question. The main obstacle, it sounds like, is public support. That's your main obstacle to
Yeah,
implementing it.
uh
Okay. All right. Well, then
I
that
mean I mean
is.
okay, well okay, other obstacle that's is just like the quantity, and I think that's like the main thing that like gets people to just be like, oh, even if you do want to implement this, like it's pretty hopeless. Which is another reason why I bring back like buybacks as like probably a good first step,
Mhm.
is because you're making that less of an issue and less of a thing that people can point at in like any sort of other gun control via whatever methods, kind of trying to implement that.
Yeah.
Um,
And I think for that we learned in class is I might be getting the statistic wrong, but I don't think I am because it stood out to me because it pretty much like not perfectly, but it very like it's a very good reflection of also like wealth distribution, even though it's probably not the same groups of people. But it's 2% of Americans own 50% of the guns,
mhm.
which is like those people will be making bank.
Yeah.
Uh, so, yeah. All right. Well, that is, make sure. Yeah, that's it.
Cool.